Beautiful friends on the internet, how you're doing? Okay, welcome to another amazing tutorial. All right guys, no, it's been a long time I created video content, and I know most of you complain that you have not been seeing notification of my videos on your YouTube app. All right, sorry about that. The reason is I was caught up with some personal issues, yeah, so I had to like sort those ones out, and during this period I decided to stop, like pause content creation for a while, yeah. But right now I'm fully back, yeah. I'm ready to dish it out there and give you guys amazing thing. So far I think I've been cooking something amazing behind the scene, but and I wanted to, like, water the floor a little bit. So today I just decided to do this simple application. I know it's more like it's not an advanced topic, it's more like a beginner kind of topic, yeah. So if you have any other topic you want me to treat, I'll put it down in the comment section below and I will use that to start also. All right, so this is just going to be, just as the title said, it's going to be a simple application that shows us how to generate or automatically generate many text form field in our widgets. So let's say, for example, you're building an app that takes the name of children of parents, let's say a parent app for instance, and you need to register the names of the children that the parent has. Okay, so in that case you do not know how many children this parent have. So in some scenario you want to like create like 10 test field or 5 test field, but that won't be amazing. So in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to use an add more button, and you're going to click on that add more button to regenerate another test form field, and once it's regenerated you can still validate that test form field and send it to your backend. All right, okay, so in this video I'm going to be showing us how to do it in 2 ways. I decided to use provider as the state management to actually handle this, but we are not going to start with provider for now. I'm going to do it with normal set state without any state management. So I want you guys to understand how to do it even though you don't have state management, so that when you want to implement your own state management, let's say block or river pod, it will be easier for you. All right, so starting, this is just a simple application, and you can see nothing much is here, and I've created I just added a provider dependency. You can check it out on pub.dev and add it if you want to. All right, so moving on, what I'm going to do here quickly is just to create a simple let's just add title. Okay, so it's just going to be a simple app bar, and following here we have our body. So I'll make this to be a not a scaffold. What am I doing? All right, so we just have a column here, or let's say container if the case may be. Instead of a container, let's have a column, and we have the children. So inside here, that's where we're going to put everything that we need to use for this. So I'm going to wrap this guy with a padding with 10 as its value. All right, so moving on, I'm going to like put a simple test form feed here, test form feed. Okay, and it's going to have a decoration and input decoration. All right, so this is just it, pretty much simple. You're not going to do much work on the text editing code, test form field. So if you want to work on it later, you can work on it. And we have our controller here, so it's just going to be a test editing controller like so. Okay, and yeah, simple. And so the next thing that we are going to do, since we have this boy, is to add a kind of delete icon here, because when after clicking on, okay, let's create the add more button first. As if you have more students, so you can just use the add more button. All right, so I'm going to use a container, and I normally like using container to create my buttons. Okay, but to make it easier, I think it's just better we use a test test button. Okay, and we can set an icon on it, child, and we can call it add more. Yeah, so cool. And think I want to align it to the right, so I can wrap this with an align widget. right, top right. Yeah, this works. So whenever we click on this add more, what it's going to do is going to be adding more text form feed for us to add more names and all that. Yeah, so and also that names will be validated. Okay, so moving on now, since I said I wanted to use set state, what I'm going to do now is to add a simple delete icon in case users want to delete it. So I'm going to be using a surface icon here to just show it around here. Okay, so we have the icon.delete. So in this case, I'm going to be wrapping it with a gesture detector so that it can be tappable. Okay, you can use inkware or whatever you want to use, it doesn't matter as long as it's tappable. Okay, here we have the tap widget, and remove this cost, it's not needed, and we can save it. You can see the icon is showing up there. All right, awesome. So this icon will serve as a delete icon, and we have the add more here. And then lastly, we can have one more button that will just say submit. So inside that button is just where we'll do our validation. Okay, validate feeds. Okay, so once you do this, you can now send it to your back end or wherever you were sending it to. Okay, so you can just be something like save. Cool. So this is our save button. All right, so moving on now, what you can do, since I said I wanted to start with set state, initially we are going to come here and create a list of text form feed. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to come up here and I'll just create a final list of, no need to use final, let's use list of text editing controller, and I will call it list controller, test list. Okay, let's just call it test list. Okay, just know that it's test list controllers. All right, then up here we can have our list of test editing controller. Okay, and so moving on now, what we can do, we can come up here, instead of having this guy, we can rather use a spread operator, and we can use list.generate. How many items do we want to generate? So we can specify the length using the test list.length, and we can specify the index as well. And now we can return this guy. All right, cool. And make sure you put this to, all right, it's still the same thing, nothing is changing here, but right now this text editing controller is not supposed to be directly typed. You need to come from this list. Okay, so in that case we are going to create a new variable called controller, and we can say test length, then we'll put the index. Okay, so hover on this, and it's taking the values of this list. Okay, so what we are going to do, we're going to directly type this stuff inside here. Okay, so in this case now I've saved it, and let me do a hot restart. We still have our child's name here, but it's not supposed to show child's name. It's going to show child's name with an index of, let's say, it's not supposed to be 0, because I know stuff like this starts counting from 0, so we are going to plus it by 1. So to just say child's name 1. So if we add more again to show child's name 2, child's name 3, child's name 4. All right, so far we have created the text form feed and also the button. So what I want to do now is to add a validator, because we need to make sure that each of these feeds are not empty in any way. All right, so we can just add a validator here and say if it's empty, you can just return feed is required. Okay, all right, you can just say feed is required, and if it's not, we can just return null to stop the validation there. All right, so saving it, nothing happens. So in this case, what we need to do is to create a form global key that takes a form state. Okay, so here we can have our key, form key, and we can initialize it to a global key, sorry. All right, then what we're going to do, we're going to wrap this widget that actually uses where we have the text editing controller, and we want to validate it a form widget. Okay, so it's best we wrap it with the parent one, which is the column, and we can specify the key and call it form key. All right, so now when the user clicks on this button, the only thing we need to do is just to check if form key dot current state. Okay, if form key, what am I doing? If form key dot current state dot validate. Okay, so what we can do here is just to print all is validated. Okay, that's if it's validated. So we can now print out the list, the new list, test list dot, or let's just loop through it and then just print out the value for test editing controller in test list. Okay, so we can just print, right, for controller in test editing list, so we can just print controller.test sharp. So that's after it has been validated, right? Okay, so we can now click, you can see showing feed as required, so everything is showing red. So if we type in a value, it's going to print out the value for us. You can see it. So but now we want to add more items if it needs be, and when is the initial index, we don't want to show the delete icon because it's not nice to delete the first test form field. Then if they delete it, where are they going to add more fields? So it won't really make any sense. So for in that case, what I'm going to do is to create a method to handle adding of more test form field, another method to delete test form field, and yeah, so that's pretty much what we need to do. So I'm going to have add test feed method, and it's going to take a parameter of test editing controller, yeah, which will be a value. And moving on, we are going to have a, since we have our list here, test list, so what I'm going to do is to use test list dot add value. Okay, and don't forget to call set state because that's what we are using here. So the next one is going to remove test feed. Okay, so the only thing I want to remove is the index of the item we are deleting. So I'm going to use int of index as the parameter, and I will say test.remove at index. Okay, and don't forget to call set state as well. Yeah, so that's pretty much what we need. So moving on now, we can call this add feed, where we have add more button. Okay, so inside here I can just put this guy, add feed, and I can now put a new test editing controller. Okay, so once we click, we are adding a new test editing controller. And if you save it now and click on add more, you can see more feeds are being added, right? This is cool, great, amazing one. But now we can delete because if we're deleting, you need to like remove those items. So if you even type on one, you can see it's not affecting the other one. So if you also click this, it will ask you to validate each and every one of them. So until you enter all the values, that's when it will not print. So once you enter all the value, you now see all the values, and you can validate this and send it over to your back end or do whatever you want to do with it. All right, but now we need to know how to delete, but it's not working. So what I'm going to do, since we already have this icon to delete, I'm just going to call this method that I created remove test feed, and then specify the index. Okay, then the index goes like this, sharp. So the index is coming from this generated list, and so saving it, if I click here, you can see it's going off and it's deleting the particular index. All right, so but now we have deleted that last one, which is not really nice. So it's not supposed to go off because this delete is not supposed to show here, except to click on add more. That's when it adds again. So what we are going to do inside this surface icon, we are going to check if index is equal to 0. Okay, return null, or this. Saving it, you can see the index, because the first index is 0, so it's not showing the delete icon for that very index. You can only delete the following index, but you can't delete the first one. So let's say destiny, and we say add maths, and save it. You can see the values destiny add maths. Awesome. So you can delete add and only click destiny, save destiny and maths. You can click delete this, and awesome. So you can see how cool it is. very simple thing, nothing much. And don't forget to always put finals when you're working with stuff like this to avoid kind of multiple calling and state rebuilding. All right, cool. So now we are done with the implementation with set state. Now let's move everything over to the provider. Okay, so we can, so if in case you don't know, provider is a state management tool for Flutter. So if you want to learn more about it, I have a video tutorial on it in my YouTube channel, so I can also put it down in the comment section below so you can easily access it. All right, moving on. Since we already added our provider, I'm going to create a simple file here, and I will call it okay, let me just create a folder. I will call it providers. And inside here, I'm going to create the feed provider. Okay, so permit me to duplicate to like split the screen so we can see what is going on per time. Sorry. All right, so we have this class, and we can call this feed provider. And we can extend chain notifier, which we all know about when you're working with provider, because it gives us access to the notify listener. And notify listener is just like set state, so it helps us like notify every UI that is listening to our provider. Okay, so what I'm going to do here first is to create, remember we already have this list here, this test list. So I'm going to move this to, no, a lot of errors will show now, so I'm going to cut it and move it over to this guy. So we have our final test editing controller, our test list, and what I'm going to do now is to create a getter for it, and say list test editing controller, and in here I'm going to create a getter, and this getter is going to have the test list. So this one will be accessible by the UI, okay, but this initial one is going to be private. Okay, so we just use it to set the value and then call notify listener to notify all the listeners. All right, so moving on now, the next thing we need to do is to add test feed and remove test feed. So I'm also going to copy this, and I will create them as a setter. Okay, put set before it. All right, so we have our test editing controller. This still the same thing, it's just that we are going to change the set state to a notify listener. All right, same thing too applies to this one. We're just going to change it to a notify listener. You can see how simple it is. So provider is not something you need to key yourself over. It's very simple and sweet to understand. Also, this form key, I don't want it to be in the UI as well. I want to handle all the validation, everything inside the provider, and the UI will just show us whatever value is being rendered. Okay, so we can have our form key, which is awesome. Then we can have a method which you can just call submit forms. Okay, so inside this method is where we are going to do all our validations and everything that needs to be done. So in that case, I'm going to copy this if form key dot current state is validate, do something, do this. Okay, so I'm going to cut it and put it inside here. If form key, remember we look at our form key dot current state dot validate, print all is valid, all is validated. Okay, and you can now print out the controller dot test or whatever you want to print. All right, so moving on now, you can see all these stuffs are showing error. We don't really need to do much. What we just need to do is to wrap this guy with a consumer widget. Okay, so I normally use stream builder to give me that first, then I can now edit it. So import it. Remember, consumer works with type very much, so you can use this feed provider to specify the kind of class it's going to be listening to. All right, so we can remove this and change this to model. So we have a child here, but I haven't used this child before, so I'll just replace it with an underscore. So now to access this form key, instead of making it private, we are going to make it public. Okay, and here now we are going to use model dot form key. All right, so it will give us access to this. If you hover with this model, you see that it's a feed provider giving us access to the values here that are not private. Okay, and we have anything that has underscore is a private variable, and it cannot be accessed outside this class, only inside this class. But anyone that you didn't specify that underscore before the variable name will be accessible outside the application. Okay, so we have a model dot test feed as well. And we have here too model.textFeed. So we are now accessing this getter to get the value. All right. So whenever notify listener is called, it sets the value of this test feed, and this getter receives it, and then it generates on the UI. So we have the model.remove test feed, which is a setter. So in that case, it's not a method. You can see what we are going to do is just to remove this guy and set it as a setter like so. All right. And when we have the add test feed, which is model.add test feed, and we can do same here. All right, cool. And I know there's a lot of errors because error could not find the correct feed provider above this consumer widget. Okay, so because when you're using provider, you need to register the provider as a global listener. So what we are going to do, we're going to go to our main.dat where we are already, and inside our material app, we are going to wrap it. We have change notifier provider. That's if you want to use one provider throughout your app, and we also have multi-provider. But in this case, I don't want to use change notifier provider. I just want to use multi-provider. So that way, to be easier for you in case you want to add multiple providers. You can actually look at my UI, my previous tutorial, which I'll be putting in the comment section to see how it's done. All right. So in this case, I'm going to wrap this guy with a column. Okay. We're going to remove it because it's not supposed to be there. So we change this guy to a multi-provider. It's actually a class in the provider package, and it takes multi-provider takes a child and a providers. So we can just specify providers here where we are going to put all our providers, including this one. And if we have any other provider again, we can still put it there. And then secondly, we can now specify the child like so. And you can see the package, blah blah blah, children is not empty, so this provider must not be empty whatever you're doing. So in that case, I'm going to set this value. Okay, I'm going to register this change notifier provider, and you can use context, but most times I just prefer using an underscore. Okay, and you can use this. All right, so if you want to add more providers, you can just register them and add you can just change the class name and add multiple providers if you want to. All right, so now fix that, and you can see the app now is building, no errors. You might want to also do a hot restart, it doesn't matter, but this is just a one-page app, so nothing much. All right, so what happens here now is when after everything has been added and the user wants to submit, once the user clicks on save, we can just call the model.submit form. That's the only thing we need. We don't really need to pass anything via construct or whatever. Everything will be gotten from this TextFormField. If you have other getter and setter, you just access them directly because you're already validating them inside here. Okay, so moving on now, clicking on this, you can see feed is required. Similar thing. Okay, so if you press this, you can see it's giving us the value, and add more, delete. You can see how cool it is. The UI is just amazing. So it's just making everything look seamless and simple. So you might be wondering, okay, what about you want to send this name now to the back end? How are we going to handle something like that? Well, it's very easy. And so in this case, I will just suggest you come up here and create something like a payload. So you can just call it payload, and it can just be empty for now. Then we can create a temp list. Okay, it's going to be a list of string. You can call it temp list, temporal list. I think to be deleted whenever we want to do any other thing. So what we'll do now for var I in controller, so we are not going to be using this. Okay, yeah, in controller, what we are going to be doing is to add temp list dot add all the controller dot test. Okay, so once it's been added, we can now come here and say payload, and we can say we can create a key for it. Okay, children name. So you know how we create JSON and all those payload when we are sending it to backend. So you need to study how HTTP works and JSON as well. So we can just add the temp list directly into here. So once everything has been done, we can just maybe print it out. All right. Hope this works. Let's print out the payload and like so. Okay, so save it, and if I click here now, you can see children name. It has been added. It has added it to this payload here. Children name, blah blah blah. The first name, the second name, and the third name. So if I add another name again and say hello world and click on save, you can see it has been added. So in this case now, you can now pass this data to your HTTP or your backend or wherever you want to send it. You just send this payload over to it, and yeah, that works. And so this is pretty much how you can generate it. Okay, so you might be wondering, what about you want to like pass, when the user opens the screen for the first time, you want to generate a kind of random number of text form field depending on what was provided. Okay, so to do that, what we can do here now, and let's say I just come to this screen for the first time to enter my name, and you want to generate random numbers field, or maybe the parents can say, you can maybe have a first widget that will ask how many children do you have. The parent might say 3. So when the parents comes to this screen, you want to show 3 text form field. When the user have 5, you want to show 5 text form field. How do you handle that? You want to do that without having this add more button, but we can still leave the add more button for now, but I just want to show you an experiment. Okay, so what we can do firstly is to have a kind of init state. Inside our init state, we can generate fields. Okay, generate initial fields. Okay, like so. So we can have a kind of a random number, which can just say random, and rand equals to random.nextInt. So it can be maximum, let's just say 10. Yeah, for the sake of this, it's supposed to be an integer, not a rand. So what we can do here now, we can just write something like run a for loop on this hand, and then based on the for loop, we can add the number of text form field that we want, right? So see how it works. We can say for int I, let's use I, int I equal to 0, sorry. Then we can use I less than rand. Okay, will this work? Okay, then we have I increment by 1. All right, so once we do this, after the looping, what I want to do now is to add, based on the number of items, we can just say TextFormField.add text editing controller. Yeah, based on how many numbers that we have. So after everything has been complete, we can call notify listener. But I think this will throw error. But let's see. We can call notify listener. So generate initial feed will be called whenever the init state is being triggered. So we can have our init state here. So in this case now, since we are not wrapped with consumer here, we can use the provider, which you can still use to access variables or methods inside the provider class. So we can use provider.ofContext. Okay, you want to make sure you put list into false because this is a UI thread, it's not really needed. And remember I told you that provider works very well with data types, so you also want to put your feed provider to tell provider the kind of class to list into. And here we can now call generate initial feeds. All right, save it, and if you run now, it's going to generate a random number, but for now we don't really know how many random numbers were generated. So in that case, I'm going to print rand. Okay, so I'm calling testFeed.add. I think I'm supposed to call this guy. Okay, I think I'm supposed to call add test feed, which we already have here, and say test editing controller, like so. Okay, because it's going to automatically call the notify listener for us. So I want to know how many integer was printed. So let's do a hot restart again. 8 was printed, but looking at this now, it did not generate it for us. So that means something is wrong somewhere, and we need to look at the issue. Okay, test feed for I in 0, I greater than. No, sorry, I did a mistake there. So I'm going to run it again, and you can see it's actually adding it. If you hover here now, you can see we have 4 already, and it's adding 1 2 3 4 5. This 5 is not supposed to be here, because the reason why it's showing 5 is because counting in programming uses 0. It starts from 0. So in this case, we are going to plus this by 1. So the 0 will be 1 2 to 5. So save it and run it again. So it gave us, nope. Okay, hold on, okay, minus it by 1. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's run it and see. We have 2, so it's giving us 2 items. Let's run it again and see. We have 3, it's giving us 3 items. Cool. And the validation still works same way, no issues. But the thing now is that we have this error showing up. So the error is saying that we are using set state or mark needs build core during build. So to fix, the reason is that we are calling notify listener when the UI is still rendering. Okay, so to do this, what we are going to do, I'm going to set this with a widget binding dot add post film dot instance. So what this does is that it waits for the UI frame to complete, okay, before running calling notify listener. So that way it's not going to affect the building of the UI, it's not going to break anything. Okay, so that's what it does. So it will just wait for the frame to complete executing before calling notify listener. So that way everything will be cool. So I don't need this timestamp. Save it. And if I run it now, you can see there will be no error printed. We have 4 and we have 4. Here we can still add more if you want. Yeah, so it won't break anything in our app. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We have 0, so that means nothing is printing. So I have 0. Once we have 0, it's just going to like look at the initial one and put it there for us. So cool. But when you're sending user from an STUI to another one, you need to validate that to make sure that they are not sending 0. So it must be 1 2 3 and above. All right, depending on the number of children they have. All right, guys, this is pretty much everything I wanted to show you, and you can see how cool and simple it was. And thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next video, and please do not forget to subscribe. And also don't forget to tell me the kind of tutorials you want me to tweet later in my next coming videos. All right, see you guys in the next video. And this is more like a simple application, so don't really, but I believe you learned a lot about provider and also many more other things. Okay, take care guys, I'll see you all in the next video.